My name is Caroline de Posada. You probably already know that because you're here. My mission is to create inspirational and actionable programs in all things wellness, mindset, and relationships, because I want to help you live your best life. And I do that through my core community, with which so many of you have been a part of, and through my newsletter and all of our RejuvaFast programs, and my favorite, which is our Connect with Caro Expert Series. Now, as you know, I have an incredible community of people that I respect and I admire, and that have expertise on so many different areas. And I welcome them into my community because I want to share my friends with you guys and share with them their expertise and their knowledge, and really help enrich your life through these Zoom calls. And that is why we are here today. Today, I am introducing Bruce Turkel. And Bruce Turkel is someone that you may already know because he is a TV personality. He's been on CNN, on Fox, on all sorts of TV major outlets. He is a speaker. He is a branding guru. He has worked with Discovery, with CNN, with a huge Hasbro, with huge corporations. He's written 5 best-selling books. Some of you may know him because he plays the harmonica or because he doodles, but I know him as my personal friend. Welcome, Bruce. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Now, if you guys read my newsletter, then you may have already heard this, but the reason I know Bruce is because he was friends of my dad. And I've known him since I was a kid, but I knew him as a friend of my dad's. And when my father passed away, my father said to me, always stay in touch with Bruce. Like that was something that was a big, and there was a few other people too that he said, always stay in touch with these people because these people are going to care about you when I'm not here anymore. And I remember him telling me that. And after he passed away, Bruce called me one day and, obviously was saying, anything that you may need, I'm here for you, et cetera, like a lot of people did. But he made a promise to me that day. He said, I am going to take you under my wing and I'm always going to take care of you. And I'm here for you. And if you need a mentor, if you need a friend, your dad was a good friend of mine, and I am going to be here. And he has stayed true to that promise for the last 6 years. He has been such an incredible mentor and friend and like another dad. I mean, to the point that he does some things sometimes that remind me of my father. And I'm like, my God, he's like my dad. It's the coolest thing in the world. So for me to be able to bring him on in this setting. She doesn't always
say it like that. Oh my God, like you're like my dad. She says, oh my God, you're like my dad. That's more accurate.
And sometimes there's tears shed as well. Sometimes I'm not smiling when I say he's like my dad.
Sometimes crying. She says, what do you think? You're my dad?
Yes, that's right. So, it's a real relationship, right? Like sometimes I love him and sometimes I can't stand him. So that's what it's all about. So thank you, Bruce, for being here. We're very excited because you just released your new book. And I see it above your head.
Yeah, there it is, right? Wait, let me get this right. There it is, right there.
That is amazing. For those of you who have seen, I'm gonna spotlight him here. Dave Bricker right now is thinking, Caroline, I've already taught you how to spotlight people when you put them on your Zoom calls. Make sure you spotlight him. So here we go. Bruce, I am so excited about your new book. It is, in my opinion, this is your masterpiece, my friend. You knocked it out of the park.
It's interesting. Well, it's wonderful to hear you say that, of course, but it's interesting to hear you say that when I look at the faces who are here on the screen, because so many of the people who are here actually had a lot to do with the writing of this book. Susan was an advisor to me in all of the activities I was doing, which I then talked about in the book. Susan is also featured in the book. Seth is featured in the book. Dave was the person who took my book from being 700 pages of my ramblings and turned it into, let's hope, 400 pages of cogent thought, and also put it all together. Caro was reading it as I was writing chapters, because, quite often when you write a book, the big fear is that, as they say about pushers, you get high on your own supply. You're breathing your own exhaust. And I'm not always sure that I'm saying what I want to be saying. So I send it to people I respect and say, hey, does this make sense? So hearing you say that now, because you already read the book in 3 or 4 of its iterations. So now hearing that from you is very, very nice.
And I shared this with you off screen, and I'll share it again. You know, when you're a writer, and for those of us that have written books that are on this platform, you know that when you see an amazing book, normal people read it and go, wow, what an amazing author that is. But if you are a writer, when you read a book, you go, wow, what an amazing editor he must have had. Right? Because we all know that from the first draft until the final draft, there's a lot that takes place in it. And as I was reading this book, it was good when it was the first draft. And now it is excellent. It is absolutely excellent. And I know that that is a work of you and your amazing editor who's on this call.
Well, I had 2 great editors because Susan edited for me as well. People sometimes, it's very nice, people will read my blog post or a book I've written and they'll compliment me on my writing. And I always tell people, I'm not a good writer. I'm a good rewriter. The idea is you write it, you put your thoughts down, and then you rewrite and rewrite and rewrite. And that's where the craftsmanship comes in. And then the most amazing thing, you can have other people, in this case, Dave Bricker and Susan Ford Collins, actually add their skills and talents to make my work even better, which is fabulous because it's still perceived to the world as mine, but they each went in and honed and tweaked and polished little bits of it and just made it better and better every time.
And to me, it's kind of crazy that we have this trio all here on the Zoom call, because likewise, Susan is my life coach and my love. She and I were born on the same day, but I met her because Bruce sent me to her. He said, you need to go see Susan. I said, why? He said, don't ask questions, just go see her. And then I showed up.
You sound like my father.
And then I said, you sound like my father. And then I showed up and I said, Susan, she asked me, why are you here? And I said, I don't know. Bruce made me come. So, and a year and a half later, we were still working together. When I published my book was a year and a half later. We had published a book together. We had been working together. She was a part of all of it. And then I had Dave Bricker who edited it as well. So same thing. I had Susan working on it. I had Dave editing it. And then of course, who designed the book cover? Bruce Turkel. So it is amazing that we're all here. But we're not here to talk about how we wrote the book, although it's very fun and I could talk about it all day. We're here really to talk about that universal question of, is that all there is? And Bruce, the reason I wanted to bring you into this community and interview you for my particular audience is because my audience, we do not get together for business principles. We're not masterminding on how to make our businesses better or how to brand our businesses or how to do better customer service or marketing or any of that stuff. They get that from somewhere else. What we talk about in our community is about wellness, habits, healthy eating, exercise, a mindset, doing what you say you are going to do. And with all the principles, there's always one universal thing that we encounter, and that's change. And your book is really not a business book, although you can apply it to businesses. It is a question that every one of us has or will ask at some point of our lives, which is that all there is? And is it time for me to change? Would you agree with that?
Well, I absolutely agree. I have to admit, I wasn't that strategic when I first started working on this project. It was really an issue of the old saying, we teach what we need to learn. So there were things that I was exploring in my own life that I was trying to figure out. And just very quick story, when I ran my advertising agency on a pretty regular basis, friends of mine or clients of mine would come to me and ask if we could have a meeting. They said, but it's not business, it's personal. Similar, Caro, to what you just pointed out. Even though I was their business consultant, their business advisor, they would want to have a personal conversation. Of course, I was open to that. And they would all say essentially the same thing, which was, paraphrased, I've reached a level of success in my business or in my life My family is healthy. I have money in the bank. My business is good. Different degrees, of course, but I've reached a level of success. And gosh, I'm just not happy at what I'm doing. And all I ever wanted to do was be a lawyer, be a doctor, be a coach, be a this, be a that, run a business. And now I've accomplished that, and I'm not very happy with it. And the question I was wondering when they're telling me these things is, why are they coming to me? And what I found out was, because I ran a business, because my business was creative. I was a creative director at an advertising agency, which meant travel and photo shoots and writing. They all thought that I had figured out how to have a more creative lifestyle, how to actually do what I wanted to be doing. So they were coming to me to kind of get advice over what they should be doing. Of course, I didn't have any idea about what they should do. And I would tell them that, but I would say, the one thing I think you ought to do is, where'd it go, is you ought to keep a journal. You ought to write down what you're going through, because a number of people come to me with this issue. And I think you ought to keep track of your journey, because you might be able to write a book about it, or you might be able to counsel people about it. And how many times did I have to hear people say the same thing? And by the way, give the same advice before I finally went, why don't I take my own advice? Because I was just as curious and not disappointed, but disillusioned with what I was doing and wondering what I could do better. So I actually started keeping that journal. I actually started taking notes about this. And what I found was, as I started speaking to people, that this concept of, is that all there is? Is that really what I'm going to do for the rest of my life? Was universal. And therefore, it wasn't necessarily a business issue, although it affects businesses, but it was a personal issue. I also found it affected people at every stage of life. I thought it would be people in their 70s and their 80s, even though I was much younger than that at the time. But as I spoke to more and more people, and more people would recommend someone else I should talk to, what I found out was this thing was universal. And then one day, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I want to hear the rest of it.
Just quickly, I was listening to a story on NPR where a very young reporter was interviewing a gentleman who was an oral surgeon. He was in his 70s, and he was a very renowned oral surgeon. He had invented some technique that had changed the science of oral surgery, had saved the mouths of thousands, or who knows, tens of thousands of people. And he was retiring. Specifically, he was retiring to do some woo-woo job. And to be honest, I don't remember what it was. He was going to raise goats and make goat milk, or he was going to make candles or make sailboats. I don't remember, but one of those things. And the reporter, who was obviously much younger, in his 20s, said to him, why are you doing this? And he says, well, I've always wanted to be, let's say for the sake of argument, a candle maker. I've always wanted to be a candle maker. And the reporter said, well, then why haven't you been a candle maker? And he said, well, because I went to medical school and I became an oral surgeon. It's what I needed to do. It's what I wanted to do. Then I came up with this technique. And then I was lecturing around the world and I was doing all these things. He says, but I no longer want to do it. So the reporter says to him, well, why are you changing now? And the guy says, the surgeon says, because it dawns on me that a 17-year-old boy thought I should be an oral surgeon. And now at 72, I wouldn't ask a 17-year-old what I should do for the rest of my life. So why am I following that advice? Now, you've already figured it out, but the reporter did not. He didn't realize that the 72-year-old was talking about himself when he was 17, when he said, I'm going to go to college and I'm going to go to dental school and I'm going to become an oral surgeon. But the reporter was too young to have that sense of, oh, yeah, I see your point. And that's when the bomb went off over my head, because the light bulb went off, rather, because I realized I'm still doing what I wanted to do when I was in college and decided to go to design school. But I'm not 21 anymore. Why the hell am I still doing that? And that's the day I started writing the book.
Right. That's amazing. And I'm chuckling because, they tell people that they shouldn't marry young. And I'm thinking, well, that's probably why, because the person that 17-year-old you think that you should marry might not be the person that 72-year-old wants to be married to. I just thought it was funny.
Yeah, you wake up one day and you say, who the hell are you? And you're not
Right.
talking about them, you're talking about your reflection in the mirror.
Yeah, yeah. One, it speaks wonders of your marriage in particular, because the fact that you still wake up and want to be married to the same person that the college version of you wanted to be married of shows that you guys have grown together and changed together. And it's a beautiful thing. So
Thank you.
congratulations on that. Something that I thought about, and it's almost why I interrupted you, was because one thing that struck me is that when my father passed away and you took me under your wing, I knew you as Bruce Turkel, the speaker and the ad agency guy. And I remember you inviting me to your office, and you had this huge building in Coconut Grove, and it was so massive and impressive, right? And you walk into this office and you have staff and you've worked on all these big projects and you have all your books laid out on the table, and everything that you do is with excellence, and excellence is the best word to describe it. It's pristine. You're a pristine person. So I'm looking at you as an older man who has this beautiful marriage. You've raised kids, you've got the building, you've got the job, you've got all this amazing life that you've created for yourself. And all of a sudden you started that transformation and that transition. It just so happened that my father's death coincided with that. So I got to see that side of you. And I saw the confused, I don't know what I'm going to do next. Where do I go from here? Do I sell the business? Do I sell the building? How, a lot of the questions that we think we experience at 20, and here you are experiencing it at what we would consider the top of the mountain. And I got to see you go through that. And it was, for me, eye-opening, because I'm like, oh, we think that we're just going to climb up, and then when we're there, we just stay there. But nobody realizes that when you're there may be another climb. There may be a shift, like things change. Do you want to talk a little bit about what that felt like for you at that time?
Well, sure. I mean, there's so many different ways to approach that comment and that question. From, listen, what you find to be a level of success, or what externally looks like a level of success, may or may not be to you or to others. The other thing, keep in mind, I was in the hype business. I ran an advertising agency, so it would make sense that we would have all the look, the feel that would give clients, prospective clients, the sense of all the things you're saying. Wow, look at all the books, look at all the work, what a great office, look at all the staff. So just because it looks that way from the outside looking in does not mean that's how people are experiencing it. And you know that you never want to judge someone else's marriage, because you don't know what goes on behind closed doors. You never get to spend a day in another person's moccasins, as they say, to walk in another person's shoes. You don't actually know what people's lives are like. You only know what the perception of their life is like through your own filters. But what I realized was I had a great business partner, Roberto. We were partners for 30 years. We got along famously. We both were yin and yang. He did what I didn't want to do, vice versa. But I remember I would come back from pitching business, and whether it was local or I had to travel, but Roberto worked insane hours. So I might get back from a flight from the airport. I would stop at the office, and it'd be late at night, and I'd go in his office, and I just got back from somewhere, and he'd say, so what happened? And I'd say, well, I have good news and bad news. And he'd always say, tell me the good news first. I'd say, okay, the good news is I just met with the XYZ company in wherever, and they love the presentation, and they want to hire us, and they're going to spend all this money, and we need to get started tomorrow. And he'd say, great, what's the bad news? And I would say, I just met with the XYZ company, and they love our work, and they have all this money to spend, and they want to get started tomorrow. Because I knew exactly what was going to happen. I knew what the engagement was going to be like. I knew what the client was going to be like, because I had done it so many times before. And these things I wanted when I was the 17-year-old or the 21-year-old choosing design school were no longer the things I wanted. And I can remember to this day that I was sitting in Susan Ford Collins's office, and I was telling her this story. And she said to me, well, let me ask you a question. When you leave on these trips to go find business, when you come back, do your employees give you presents? And I said, what? She said, do they give you presents? I didn't know what she was talking about. She said, do they give you things? Do they show you work they had done or money they had brought in, or do they give you presents? And I said, well, yeah, some of them do. I mean, Roberto does, our CFO does, my bookkeeper does, some of our art directors or copywriters show me work that I never thought of that we could present. She said, or do you feel like the mother bird returning to the nest and all the little baby birds are in the nest with their mouths open going, dee, 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 dee. And then you have to drop worms into all their mouths. And I have this mind picture. I tend to visualize things when I hear them. And I have this mind picture of those little nasty featherless birds, you know how ugly they are, with the wet, yellow, red throats just, and every time I walked into my office, that's what I felt. And Susan nailed it. But worse, she put this mind picture in my head that I could not get rid of. And
that's what she calls hologramming.
She hologrammed me. Yes. And that's when I realized that despite everything you said, the cool office with the glass block and the Italian furniture and all the people running around and all of that, I didn't want any of that. I thought
you wanted to be in jeans and a t-shirt and hang out by the beach.
Shorts, sweetheart. Shorts, running shoes, and a t-shirt. Yes, I did not want to be in a suit and tie doing what I was doing.
So you said something that I think applies to all of us, which is, you said you're in the hype business. And what I think is fascinating is that now with social media, Instagram, Facebook, we are all in the hype business, right? It used to be that was reserved for special people like Bruce Turkel, but now everybody has the ability to create illusions with their social media accounts. And it could really generate a lot of comparison and judgment of your own life based on what you see in these pictures and in these lives that are being created for display. So I love the fact that you're sharing that, because when we define our own success, and that is something I talk about with my core community all the time, is you need to define your own success. And when you define your own success, you may realize that what looks beautiful in that picture is not actually the life that you want to live. And I think you do a beautiful job in your book at showing so many different people who have seen what their picture looks like and said, looks good, but it's time for a change. And that's kind of what you went through. So kudos to that.
Well, there's a rule about hype, by the way, which says quite simply, create as much as possible, but never believe it. So there's nothing wrong with using all of those social media opportunities to put out an image that will help you accomplish what you want to accomplish. In my case right now, selling books or getting speaking engagements, but it could be finding clients or finding someone to date or whatever you're using social media for. Make as much hype as possible, but never believe it. There's a new curse rather that says, may your life be half as happy as it appears on Facebook, because nobody's posting pictures of themselves in bad situations. We understand that. Just don't ever start to believe that stuff matters. It matters from a business point of view, from a presentation point of view, perhaps, but it certainly doesn't matter from a personal satisfaction point of view.
Yeah. And you've done that. You decided at that time, and you talk about in the book about how you had a meeting where you brought these important people together and you masterminded this idea that you were having. And I remember that I was at that meeting, which was so cool. Not because I was important, but because you had taken me under your wing and invited me to sit at this table with all these.
Well, Seth was at that meeting as well.
Seth was at that meeting as well. And you know, Seth, I remember, I don't know if you remember, but we had lunch and you had me read that book, The Big Leap. And it was an incredible read. I loved it. That was at the beginning of my own transformation. So it was a great recommendation on your part. And I enjoyed so much reading your story in Bruce's book. For those of you that have not bought it, he is on page 175. And it's Seth Warner's story, which is absolutely phenomenal. So you created this change. You made a decision that you were going to start interviewing people and that you were going to write their stories and you were going to give us, everybody else, the almost like a map to figure out how we could create change in our lives. And what I want to know is, what did you learn from this process? Like, how, based on all your interviews and all your stuff, not with just what you wrote for us, but what did you learn for yourself?
Well, I learned so many things, and I learned so many things on many different levels. One of the reasons that I wanted to interview people was obviously to get answers, right? I wanted to hear how people did this. What did they do? I had friends or people I knew, or as I worked on the book, people would be recommended to me that I didn't know, but I could go out and speak to and say, okay, you went through this process. What did you learn? One of the things that was important was not to say to the readers, look, this is how you should do it. This is the way it works, because there is no one way. Obviously, everybody's life is special and unique to them. So me telling my story is just one way of doing it. So that's why I went out and I ultimately spoke to about 35 or 40 different people, and I chose to feature 14 of them in the book. I'll use more of them in future books. But one of the things that I learned quite clearly is that there's no one way. I mean, we kind of taught, or at least let me not say we, I kind of talked myself into believing this is the way to do it. My opinions are right. My beliefs are right. My explorations on the trail are correct, but there's always another way to get where you're going. It's why there's so many sayings about it. There's more than one way to pass an elephant through a keyhole. I don't know where that came from, because I don't think there's any ways to do that, but that's the saying. There's more than one way to skin a cat. Also disgusting. Who the hell wants a skinned cat? But there are these sayings. More than one way to put a camel through the eye of a needle. And the reason there's so many sayings is because the truth is there are lots of ways to accomplish the same thing. I learned that. I also learned that just because I totally disagree does not mean that A, they're wrong, B, there's not things for me to learn, whether it's you should do this, or guess what? Maybe you shouldn't do that, or that there's not value to be found from people who you don't necessarily think did the right thing. And I can use the example of where I learned this, and I actually wrote about this in the book, and Susan's on the call. Susan was telling me about the universe providing opportunities. Now, I divide people in my life into many different categories, but one of them are magical thinkers or non-magical thinkers, people who believe in the universe will provide or religion will provide, and people who don't. I happen to be a non-magical thinker. Susan believes in these things. I'm not saying either one is right or wrong, but Susan says to me, and you'll know you're on the right path because the universe will put little explosions along the path. And if you're paying attention, you'll see them. At which point I said, come on, Susan, you know I don't believe in that universe will provide stuff. And Susan says, that's okay. The universe doesn't care if you believe in it or not, which I think is such a beautiful answer. First of all, it's a true definition of faith. Faith says, it doesn't matter what you think, I have faith, therefore I believe. But second of all, the way of saying, well, you believe what you want to believe. There's nothing wrong with that, but understand these forces are working on your behalf, regardless of whether you think they are or you think they're not. Now, think about what an eye-opener that is to someone like me who wants empirical evidence. And then someone I trust, respect, admire, believe in so much says to me, yeah, okay, good for you. You keep going with that, but understand there's other things happening here. I mean, that was a magical experience, to use that word. I think writing this book made me much more open to looking at things from other points of view. You can accept it or reject it, but there's no real need to be so dogmatic about things. It's perfectly okay. And then, by the way, Susan pointed out a number of the little explosions, which if I was more open to agreeing with her, which I won't do in public, I would have said, yeah, you know what? I kind of can't argue with that. Oh yeah, that's a good point. Oh yeah, that did happen. You're right, but I don't want to give her that much credit.
I'm chuckling because
right.
Because what fun would that be? My father used to say that, very much on the same boat, that there were critical thinkers and magical thinkers. And he always encouraged me to be a critical thinker, as you very well know, Bruce. And you and him shared that together. And then, so you are my, you're one of my gurus and my mentors. And I'm big into the critical thinking world, and I care very much what you think. And then you lead me, you forced me into the arms of Susan Ford Collins, who's like, the universe will provide, and she's all sorts of magical thinking. And I start experiencing this magical world, and I find myself writing a blog post, almost confessing and maybe even apologizing to my father and you, and saying, okay, I admit it, it's happened. I am a critical thinker, but I'm a magical thinker too. And it was because of my relationship with Susan. So I chuckle that you have brought this up because you and I have laughed so much about that very concept. And now I'm always like, synchronicity.
As far as I'm concerned, that email was when you came out of the closet.
I did.
And you asked what I learned. You didn't ask what I understand and agree with 100%. You asked what I learned. And this was something that I've learned from writing this book. I'll tell you something else I've learned from writing this book is writing books is I can't say it's hard. I enjoy writing, but the size of the book, say 400-ish pages, is supposed to be 400-ish pages of original thought. Coming up with enough original thought to write a book is hard. My previous book, All About Them, however many pages it is, it's all my theories on these things. But if you interview people, you get to write about their theories. So there's a good 15 or 20 pages of Seth's theories, and of Susan's theories, and of Terry's theories, and of Nelson's theories, and other people provide, provide a bulk of that portion of the book. Yes, I interpreted it, and I wrote it, and I tried to turn it into prose of some sort. But wow, what a great secret for anybody who wants to write a book but doesn't know how they're going to get through that much work. Let other people write parts of it for you. I'm willing to admit that out loud. It is a great
what it shows. There's that quote that says, in the beginner's mind, there's millions of options, and in the expert's mind, there are none. I'm misquoting it, of course, but it's the beginner's mind versus the expert mind. And I think what you're saying and what you did in this book is that you are an expert. You are quite an expert in your field, and it took a beginner's mind to write this book. You had to become a beginner in your life, not only as the author of this book by interviewing all these people, but also by beginning a new stage of your life.
Well, I love that you say that, because when I was sending the book out to publishers, the ones that were nice enough to turn me down but tell me why, many of them turn you down and you just never know why. They just say no thank you. But a few of them said, because you have to write a proposal first, and book proposals are the worst. I think it was like 80 pages explaining why I'm writing it, how I'm writing it, what else is out there, who the audience is. And a few of these publishers who turned me down, I want to be clear about that, said, this is a great book. This is a great idea. This is an idea whose time has come. Bruce is not the person to write this book. And it was like, screw you. Wait a second. I came up with this idea. You think it's a great idea, but someone else should do it? That's not going to happen. But you just you just took that negative and made it a positive. I was absolutely not the expert in this. And I was very clear about that. Here's my exploration. Let me show you. It was that idea of masterminding or strategic roundtabling or focus grouping, right? Which is what I knew from the agency business. If you're going to go out and you're going to produce products or produce messaging for people, you better understand those people. So since I was going to go out and produce projects for myself, I should understand what's out there, which is why I did the mastermind you talked about, that Seth participated, that you participated, which is why I went out and spoke to these people. It's, yes, I want to share this with the world or with the universe, but I also want to learn it for myself because I don't know these answers. And so it was fascinating to hear people's. I'll give you a great example. There's a guy in the book named Terry Bell. Terry Bell was the creative director at the largest independently owned advertising agency in Canada. They were incredibly successful. And they sold the agency, he and his two partners, at the height of the market. So he made tons of money. He also was on his third marriage, but this was not a trophy wife. This was the love of his life. They found each other, and they had 2 young children. He's in his 50s. They have 2 young children. They moved to Halifax. They lived in Toronto. So they escaped the rat race. They moved to Halifax. They're madly in love. They have these wonderful little children, and they live in this magical place. And he's talking about how wonderful this is when he is diagnosed with bladder cancer. And in fact, when he was diagnosed with bladder cancer, Caro, I introduced him to your father, and they became friendly because they were going through a similar experience. And I remember Terry telling me, and I quoted him in the book, people said to him, do you ever stop and say, why me? Oh, I didn't add, he since has had 2 heart attacks and he had a minor stroke. But people say, do you say, why me? And he says, no, I say, why not me? Look, stuff happens. This happened to me. He says, you know, the day after I sold my business, and he makes it very clear, I was the creative side. I did not run the business. So the numbers, although I was responsible for a lot of our success, I was not involved in the business side of the business. He says, the day after I sold my business, I logged into my bank account. He says, I didn't look at that big number and say, why me? He says, I went, woohoo, look what I did. He says, why is this any different? Now, that was an enormous eye-opening comment for me, because what Terry figured out was the good, the bad, he looks at it the same way as things that happen. And now what am I going to do with it? And I learned so much from that one line, 3 words, why not me? Think of what a wonderful way that is to live. I've known Terry for a long time, only professionally. Now we're very good friends. But I only knew him professionally. I would see him at agency conferences. We were in creative conferences together. But because I wrote this book, I got to interview him. Because I got to interview him, I got to hear the concept of why not me? And why not me is a life changer. Hell, why not me could be a whole book. It could be a whole speaking career. It could be a whole consulting business if that's what you chose to do with it. 3 words, why not me? That's what I learned.
And because we're talking with a branding guy, you have to know that this is not the first time Bruce has ever said that. We'll be running on Tuesday morning. And as we're running, I will say something. And all I have to do is say 1 sentence. And he goes, oh, that's a blog post. Heck, that's not a blog post. That's a speech. That's a book. We could create an entire business with that. And this is what Bruce does. He can capture this and he can brand the heck out of it. So be careful what you say about him, about in front of him, because he can turn it into so much bigger, which is one of the gifts that you have in your life, Bruce. I love that. I think it's absolutely beautiful. And with that, I think that's actually a really good transition to something that I want to talk about that is not really about the book so much, but more about you. Something that I really, really admire about you. Excuses is one of those things that's going to come up, right? You are a person who exercises, you eat well, you write book. You say you want to write a book and you write a book. You wanted to change your career and you change your career. You wanted to build an ad agency and you build a super successful ad agency. You are a person who does the things that you say you're going to do, and you do them very consistently. If I'm not mistaken, you've been running with your running group for what, 35 years now? I mean, how many years have you? Yeah. So how do you do that? How do you because everyone else, we all have excuses. We all have things that happen to us, like why me? I got a flat tire, or I couldn't write the book because I'm busy, or I couldn't do this because my circumstances. But it seems that even despite circumstances and outside factors, and you have back pain, that's something I happen to know about you. You have back pain, and yet you still find a way to be out there at 5:45 in the morning, and you still find a way to write the book, and you still find a way. How do you, or what do you attribute that consistency to? Because I think it's the one thing that we all struggle with the most.
Well, to be fair, I did throw my back out and I did not run this morning. So it's nice of you to say that, but I didn't go because I've been hobbling around. I don't know that I know the answer to that as a conscious thing. I do know that I believe my motto is GSD, get stuff done. I hate having things hanging around. And I actually like to do things and I like to be busy. But there are certain safeguards or certain benchmarks you can put in place to get things done. For example, you mentioned the running group. So we have this great group of people who get together 4 days a week at 5:45 or dark 30, as we call it, to run. Now, I show up because I know they will be there. They show up because they know I will be there. We provide that level of accountability for one another, and having accountability partners to make sure you get things done, not people who nag you about it, of course, but people who expect you to reach a certain level. By doing that, it makes it easy. I remember that the few times in my business when people asked me to do something improper, either change billing or send something, and I would always say no. And if they would ask why, I'd say, you know what, my mom reads the Miami Herald every day. If I'm going to be in the Miami Herald, it's only going to be for good things.
I love
she
that.
is my, without even knowing better, she's my accountability partner. I wouldn't even consider doing things that my mother would read about me doing, and that she would be disappointed. So I feel the same way about my children. I feel the same way about my wife. So I feel the same way about my friends. So I think that's all very, very important. The other thing is, I'll tell you a story. I was at the grocery store one day and I ran into a friend of my father's who I knew very well. And he said, what are you doing this weekend? I said, oh, tomorrow night my band is playing at some bar. So I'm going to go set up and get ready for that. Your band is playing? I said, yeah, we play from 9 to midnight at this bar. It's a lot of fun. He says, I'd love to see it. I said, well, you're welcome to go with me if you want. He said, yes, I want to go. I said, all right, we play at 9. So I got to get there about 7:30 to set up. So I'll pick you up at 7. He says, great, I'm in. Now, I am sure he's not going to go. He said he's in because it sounds like a good idea at the time, but I'm sure he's not going to go. So the next day, that was I think a Friday, this is Saturday. So on Saturday during the day, I just give him a call. I go, okay, Jimmy, I'm picking you up at 7:30, whatever I said. He goes, yeah, great. Come get me. I'll be here. Okay, good. Looking forward to it. I'm still sure he's not going to go. And I keep waiting for the phone call. I got home. I had a busy day. I'm sure he's not going to go. But sure enough, I don't get a call. So at 10 to 7, I go driving over to his house. I park the car. I get out. I knock on the door. And I am sure that his wife is going to come to the door and she's going to say, I know you're here to pick up Jimmy, but he was playing golf and then he was doing yard work and he's really tired. I'm sure of it. I'm wrong because I knock on the door. Jimmy opens the door, kisses his wife goodbye. All right, let's go. I'm ready. He gets in the car. We go there. We have a great time. Our band plays. He has a couple drinks, whatever. We're now driving home. And he says what a great time he had and how much fun it was. And I go, I got to admit to you that I was sure you were not going to come. I'm so surprised. And he says, why? And I said, well, because I saw you the day before and it seems like so much fun. But then you start thinking about it, say 7:30. What am I going to do while they're setting up? And then I'm going to sit there for 3 hours. And then they have to take the stuff apart. And I'm not going to get home till 2 o'clock. And right? And he says, every one of those thoughts went through my head. He said, but then I remembered what your grandfather used to say. I didn't even know he knew my grandfather. He was friends with my dad. It didn't even dawn on me, but he said that my dad was a builder on Miami Beach. My grandfather worked with my dad, and Jimmy used to go to the construction sites, and my grandfather would be there, usually playing pinochle with his buddies, but they would be there. And he said, you know what your grandfather always said? I said, no, I have no idea. He says, your grandfather's mantra was, it's too easy to say no. And I thought, gosh, that's brilliant. And that's exactly how I feel about stuff. It's too easy to say no. I'm too busy. I can't afford it. I don't have time. My back hurts. I did it last week. It's too easy to say no, which is why most of the things I get invited to, I say yes. Let me see if I can go do that. Most of the challenges I set, whether it's exercise or writing a book or whatever, it's, let's see if we can do it. It's too easy to say no.
I love that you said that. And I'm thinking of a quote and I'm looking it up because I shared it with my community because it was that important from your book. and it was about maturity. And I'm going to read it to you because you said this, and I thought it was: maturity teaches us that not everything pleasurable is worth hanging on to any more than everything that hurts is worth eliminating. And the reason that came into my mind is because what I'm hearing from what you've said is that you are a person who behaves based on principles. Your principles govern. So you have accountability is a huge principle for you, and you are not going to do anything that's going to put you on the Miami Herald and have your mom be disappointed, and you are not going to do something that's going to have your wife be disappointed, and you are going to show up to your running group because it's easier to say no. But you're not a person that is afraid to do things that hurts, just like you're also not a person that has to do everything that is pleasurable. And
I didn't know I said that. That's brilliant of me. I like that. Thank you. I forgot that. I will tell you that I'll be at lunch sometimes. You know, I've lived here my whole life. I grew up on South Beach. I grew up on Miami Beach. So I still have friends from elementary school. And I'll go somewhere for lunch and I'll see 3 or 4 of my friends having lunch together. And they'll say something about, you know, oh my God, can you believe we went to elementary school all those years ago? And look how skinny you are. And one of the guys will say, oh yeah, but you love to run. And I'm thinking, I never say it, but I'm thinking, I hate running. There's nothing about it I like, but I like what it does for me, and I dislike the alternative. So, you know, I go out and do it, but I don't run because I'm running along going, oh my God, doesn't this feel great? Don't I love it?
Yeah. 35 years, he still never experienced the runner's high.
Not once.
Every time we talk about the runner's high, he says, I don't know what crap they're talking about. I don't believe it. I don't think it's true. They're all a bunch of liars. I've never had a runner's high.
That is absolutely correct. You're right. I never have.
And you run marathons. So it's not like you haven't given it an opportunity.
And you know the rule about what you say after running a marathon: I will never, ever, ever run another marathon until the next one.
I know. It's an incredible thing. And I love what you said about the showing up, because that is something that makes me think of my community and also of our running group too. So right now, I am not running with you in the mornings. Why am I not running with you in the mornings? Because my son's commute starts at 6:30 a.m. now, and I cannot physically make it back on time. So now, for the last 6 years, I've enjoyed 3 or 4 runs a week with you. Now I don't have the opportunity to do that anymore, but for the one day that my son doesn't have school, or on the summer or the spring break or the Christmas break, et cetera, et cetera. So last week, it was Thursday and our kids didn't have school. And I couldn't wait to get to the running group. And I always think about how special it is that I haven't run with you since August, but I know on Thursday you're going to be there because that's what you do. And not you in particular, Bruce, right? I mean, we all have times that we can't be there, but I mean, like the establishment, the group, we are there. If it's not you, it's Tim. If it's not Tim, it's Dave, you know, but we're there, and we can count on each other. And that's something that I love about my community, is even for the women that they come into the group, they come out of the group. Sometimes they get busy. Sometimes they are not showing up the way that they want to show up, or they, you know, but they always know that when they open their app, that we're going to be there. And I love that about what you said. That accountability makes a huge difference. So I think it also shows about the importance of who you surround yourself with. And you are a master at creating a community and a network and masterminds of people that make you better. What do you want to say about that?
Gosh, I don't know. That's nice of you to say that. I don't know what I do in order to do that. I mean, look at the people who are on this call who are part of my community. You and Dave and Susan was here, and Seth. And then look at the people y'all have introduced me to. So since through you, I've met Matt and I've met Betsy. And so that outreach continues and moves on and on. But I can't tell you that that's a conscious effort, other than always making the effort to reach out to people, to follow up with people, as you said, to do what you said you would do, to try to put people first. I mean, heck, if I wrote a book called All About Them, then I ought to at least try to make some effort to provide efforts that are in fact all about them.
But what I don't see so much is you hanging out with people that are a bad influence on you. I don't see so much you hanging out with people that take you away from the principles that you stand by. So I think that's really where my question was headed, was more like, you are a person who chooses your network and your community, and you contribute to that community most definitely. And I'm not saying it's because you're a selfish person, but there is the selfishness of understanding that you need to surround yourself with good quality people that are going to help you achieve your goals.
I think that's true. And I think that you can multiply that across many things, whether it's what you choose to eat or how you choose to spend your time or what you choose to watch and read and listen to. Are you going, garbage in, garbage out? And I'm sorry, I'm not that magnanimous to say that everyone has value and everyone is worth spending time with. I mean, sure, they have value to their own lives, but it doesn't mean I have to spend time with people who I find dishonest, unpleasant, time vampires. I'll give you an example that will not put me in the best light, but it's a true example. I had a friend, very fond of this person. We used to get together for lunch on a regular basis, and he did something that really aggravated me. And I told him, you did this and I don't appreciate it and I don't like it. Life went on. We had a good relationship. He did it a second time. And I said to him, I told you the last time this happened, I really don't like when people do this. And I would rather you not do this when we're together. Life went on, things were good. Something happened. He did it a third time. And I'm quite direct, as you know. And I said to him, I told you twice not to do this. I'm sorry, it'll never happen. I said, I'm sorry, it won't happen again. The reason it's not going to happen again, in my mind, is because I'm not spending time with you anymore. I'm done 3 times. I've told you what it is. I think it's wrong. I don't want to be around this. So then one day I run into him somewhere at a restaurant. Actually, I know where, at Dave's favorite restaurant in the Grove at Berry's. And they have tables by the outside. You have to walk by. You walk the gauntlet as you leave. And he's sitting there with a friend. How you doing? Fine. How are you? We shake hands. Haven't seen you in a while. No. He says, we should get together. I said, that's not going to happen. He says, what? I said, that's not going to happen. He says, why not? I said, because I told you 3 times that I don't appreciate when you do this. You're going to keep doing it. I don't want to be around you. He says to me, you can't do that. You can't decide who you spend time with and who you don't. And I remember saying to him, I only promise till death do we part to one person. You're not on that list. And I know that wasn't very nice of me, but I was pissed. But the truth is, listen, any of us can do something wrong that someone else dislikes. But when you demonstrate that that's who you are, I just don't want to be around you. I don't want to be with you. I don't want to be near you. It's why I turned down doing expert testimony work in lawsuits. I did it once. It was awful. I hated it so much. They raved about what I did and what I said and blah, blah, blah. And it pays really well. And they called back and I said, no, thank you. That was just awful. I hated that experience. I want nothing to do with that. Oh, no, but you were so good and you had such credibility. And we laid out your 5 books and then they listened to you and what you said. I said, great. So you'll do it. Well, no, but we'll pay you this much money. And I said, no, I'm not doing it.
You're governed by principles, Bruce. You're governed by principles.
It was an awful experience.
Right. But others would do that awful experience because there was money involved. And others would be friends with that person because they were people pleasers or afraid of confrontations or don't know, or had another self-interest and reason for doing it. And I think what you've demonstrated on our call, and obviously I know this about you, but I get to shed this light on everybody else that doesn't know you personally, is that you are a man of principles and that you believe in certain principles and that you stick by them. And even if you're open-minded and you can explore different ideas, but you govern your life by a set of principles, and you know what, and maybe that's why he's been so successful, is you've been able to define what you consider success, and you've been able to go for that success because you are a principle-based person. So
I would add, though, before we take that to a fare thee well, that I was very clear in the book: don't quit your day job. It's nice to be able to say, I'm going to change my life. I'm going to do this. I'm going to stand for that principle. But if you have tuition to pay or mortgage to pay, and you need that job or that life, or to your point, you need to stay friends with that person, or you need to do the direct the expert testimony work because you need to get paid, then do what needs to be done. Meet your responsibilities. As you're doing it, look for ways that you can change your life. But don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, to completely mix my metaphors, and put yourself in a bad situation. As much as I wanted to be a public speaker, I didn't do very much of it when my kids were little because I didn't want to travel that much. Even so, they thought I traveled too much and I was away too much. So, you know, I don't want anybody to stand on the tip of the edge of the diving board and go, okay, well, I don't see a lot of water in there, but Bruce said it was okay to jump off, so let's do it. You know what? Everybody's situation is different. And if those buildings were more important to me at the time, I would have figured out a way to do it, as I figured out a way to weasel my way out of it, so I wouldn't have to do it anymore. So please don't stitch those things on a pillow, put it on your bed, and then believe every night, that is what I believe, that is what I stand for, while you're watching the rest of your life go up in smoke. That is not a good way to reach the position in life you want to be at.
So create the hype, but don't believe it.
Thank you. Thank you. I love coming full circle like that. You know that. Exactly at 11:59. Bam!
We did it. Everybody, this has been so amazing. I have enjoyed interviewing Bruce. If you have any questions that you haven't asked, you can throw them in the chat as we end this call, but we want to be very respectful of your time and end right at 12, and also be respectful of Bruce's time because I know that he's a busy guy. If you have not purchased your own copy of Is That All There Is, then I highly suggest that you go on Amazon right now and buy the book because it is wonderful and it's full of incredible information, just like this interview. And for those of you that want to share this amazing interview with your friends, then just have them join our Caro's Core Lifer community, where all of our 2021 expert calls the replays are in our membership community. So we invite you to join our membership community, be part of the experience, and be able to listen to this call over and over again because it was full of wonderful nuggets.
And do me one favor, if you are kind enough to purchase the book, and thank you for asking for that, Caro, post a review on Amazon. They give much more credence to what they call verified purchaser reviews, and I need to reach a quantity of verified purchaser reviews for a number of different reasons. So if you read it, if you like what you read, if you would post a review, I'd really appreciate it.
Yes, please do. So, and if you're not following him already on Instagram or Facebook or LinkedIn or Twitter, you can find Bruce Turkel anywhere you go because he's pretty much everywhere, including the TV when you turn it on. So I'm sure that you will find your way to our wonderful guest today again soon. So thank you everyone for being here.
Bruce, when are you publishing the audiobook for us audiobooks people?
Well, I'll tell you, Betsy, I made a mistake. My original plan was to publish the audiobook, where each of the 14 people would read their own portion. So the rest of the book is done, but I was waiting. That has turned out to be such a giant pain that I'm rethinking. And I thought it would be awesome when you get to Seth, you hear it in his voice. Well, Seth's easy. He lives in Coconut Grove. I could run over there and record it. But some of the people live in California. Someone lives in New York. Someone lives in Atlanta. Some of them are much older and don't understand the technology. So we've sent them the equipment and then they don't know what to do with it. So it kind of put a wrench in the works. And I think, yes, too many cats to herd, as Dave wrote here, too many butterflies to wrangle. So I have a feeling I'm going to give up that concept, in which case it's only a few weeks away. I just hate the idea of giving it up because it's such a cool way to do it. But
Bruce, I was going to say that in this book, and I was so amazed when I saw it. One of the people that you interviewed was Gail Carson. And Gail Carson just recently passed away. And I thought it was such a beautiful thing that her story is memorialized because you wrote this book, and her grandchildren and great grandchildren, and her legacy continues because you went out and you put this story out there.
I have to tell you, Dave Bricker gets some of the credit for that, because when Gail passed away, I said, Dave, should we write something about the fact, because the book hadn't been printed yet, it was at the publisher, but it hadn't been published yet. Should we add something about while we were doing it, she passed away and on and on? And Dave said, no, she was alive when you wrote the book. Let the book be the place where she lives forever. And oh, I just got goosebumps. I thought that was so beautiful. And then I had to add, and by the way, it'd be really tough to get her to record her portion, wouldn't it? Which he told me I should be ashamed of actually thinking out loud.
Well, it's what I thought when you said you wanted to get everybody to record their portions. I'm like, well, you're going to have trouble with page 191.
Oh, well, we're not doing that because no vale la pena. It's just, it's just too much work that we're not going to get the benefit out of.
Well, for those of you, that was a beautiful statement, and that's exactly the kind of beautiful thing that Dave Bricker would say. And for those of you that did not listen in to our expert call, he was one of our first calls this year, and his call is phenomenal. And I suggest everybody go back into Mighty Networks and replay Dave Bricker's call because it was absolutely fabulous. So thank you, everybody. All right.
Bye-bye.
Good to see you. Thank you, Bruce, for coming on. I love you.
Thank you for inviting me. This was great fun. And I'm really honored that you all took an hour out of your busy lives to listen to what I had to say. So thank you very much.